You're standing at the edge of a decision that could change everything. Maybe it's a career move, a relationship, or even stepping onto a stage to speak in front of a crowd. Your heart races, your mind floods with questions, and that familiar voice whispers, "What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough?" Sound familiar? Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. That strength is exactly what we're here to uncover. Self-doubt isn't a life sentence. It's a mental obstacle, one the Stoics believed we could dismantle piece by piece. In this video, we'll explore 22 Stoic principles designed to help you silence that inner critic, build unshakable confidence, and find clarity in the face of uncertainty. The Stoics had a powerful tool for silencing self-doubt, the Dichotomy of Control. It's simple yet transformative. They believed that some things are within our power while others are not, and self-doubt often creeps in when we waste energy on what's outside our control. As Epictetus once said, some things are within our power while others are not. Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, and aversion. In short, whatever is of our own doing. In other words, you can't control whether you'll win the race, but you can control how hard you train. You can't control how others perceive you, but you can control how you show up in the world. Let's take a practical example. Imagine someone preparing for a job interview. They might feel self-doubt creeping in, worrying about whether the interviewer will like them or if they'll say the wrong thing. But what if they shifted their focus to what they can control? They could practice their answers, research the company, and prepare thoughtful questions. By directing their energy toward these actionable steps, they're not only building confidence but also taking meaningful action, something self-doubt can't easily shake. What about you? What are you worrying about right now that's outside your control? Is it a future outcome, someone else's opinion, or a situation you can't influence? The Stoics would remind you to redirect that energy inward, toward your own choices, actions, and mindset. When you focus on what's within your power, you're not just silencing self-doubt, you're reclaiming your agency. And that's where true confidence begins. Now, let's explore a powerful Stoic tool for silencing self-doubt, negative visualization, or what the Stoics called premeditatio malorum. This practice involves deliberately imagining the worst-case scenarios in your life, not to dwell on them, but to prepare for them. By envisioning adversity before it happens, you can strip away the fear and uncertainty that often fuel self-doubt. It's like building mental armor, so when challenges arise, you're ready to face them with calm and clarity. Seneca, one of Stoicism's greatest thinkers, put it this way: "What is quite unlooked for is more crushing in its effect, and unexpectedness adds to the weight of a disaster." This is a reason for ensuring that nothing ever takes us by surprise. In other words, when you anticipate difficulty, you take away its power to shock or overwhelm you. By confronting your fears in your mind first, you reduce their hold over you in reality. Take the example of Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher. He ruled during one of the most turbulent periods in Roman history, facing wars, plagues, and political unrest. Yet he remained steadfast. How? Through practices like negative visualization. He would regularly reflect on the potential losses and hardships he might face, not to despair but to prepare. This mental rehearsal allowed him to lead with resilience and wisdom, even in the face of immense pressure. So, how can you apply this in your own life? Think about a fear or challenge that's been gnawing at you. Maybe it's losing a job, failing at a project, or facing rejection. Now take a moment to visualize the worst-case scenario. What would it look like? How would you respond? Would it really be as catastrophic as it feels in your mind? Often you'll find that even the worst outcomes are manageable, and sometimes they even open doors to new opportunities. This isn't about pessimism, it's about empowerment. By acknowledging what could go wrong, you're not inviting disaster, you're building the mental resilience to face it head-on. And when you do that, self-doubt starts to lose its grip, replaced by a quiet confidence that you can handle whatever comes your way. Let's talk about imperfection, because here's the truth: striving for perfection is a trap. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, once said, "What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, progress matters more than perfection. When we fixate on being flawless, we set ourselves up for disappointment and self-doubt. But Stoicism teaches us to see mistakes not as failures but as stepping stones. Every misstep is an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to become more resilient. Think about a public speaker, for example. Even the most seasoned speakers have moments where they stumble over their words or lose their train of thought. But rather than dwelling on those moments, they use them to refine their craft. They don't aim for a perfect performance, they aim for progress, and that's the key: progress, not perfection. Stoicism reminds us that life is messy, unpredictable, and full of imperfections, and that's okay. What matters is how we respond to those imperfections. So here's a challenge for you. Take a moment to reflect on one area of your life where you're being too hard on yourself. Is it your career, your relationships, or maybe your personal goals? Identify that area and ask yourself, am I striving for progress, or am I chasing an impossible standard of perfection? Because here's the thing: when you embrace imperfection, you free yourself from the weight of self-doubt. You stop seeing mistakes as setbacks and start seeing them as opportunities. And that shift in perspective, that's where real growth begins. Self-awareness is like holding up a mirror to your soul. It allows you to see yourself clearly, free from the distortions of self-doubt. One of the most powerful ways to silence that nagging voice of uncertainty is to truly understand who you are, your strengths, your weaknesses, and the unique qualities that make you you. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "First, say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." This simple but profound advice reminds us that self-examination is the first step toward growth. Before you can move forward, you need to know where you stand. The Stoics were big believers in the practice of journaling as a way to cultivate this kind of self-awareness. It wasn't just about writing down your day or venting frustrations. It was about reflecting deeply on your thoughts, actions, and emotions. By putting your experiences into words, you create a space to observe yourself objectively. Think of it as having a conversation with your own mind, where you can ask, why do I feel this way? What's really at the root of my self-doubt? Journaling helps you untangle the messy web of emotions and see patterns you might otherwise miss. Here's a simple example. Imagine someone who's always felt unsure about their career path. They've tried different jobs, but nothing seems to click. One day, they decide to sit down and write about their doubts, what they're afraid of, what they truly enjoy, and what they've always dreamed of doing. As they journal, they start to notice a recurring theme. They love helping others but feel stuck in roles that don't align with that passion. This moment of clarity becomes the foundation for making a bold career change, one that aligns with their true strengths and values. That's the power of self-awareness. It doesn't just silence self-doubt, it helps you rediscover who you are. So, here's a challenge for you. Take just 5 minutes today to sit with a notebook or your phone and jot down your thoughts about your self-doubts. Don't overthink it, just let the words flow. Ask yourself, what am I afraid of? What do I truly believe about myself? This small act of reflection can be the first step toward building the confidence and clarity you need to move forward. After all, as the Stoics taught us, the better you know yourself, the less power self-doubt has over you. Now, let's shift our focus to one of the most transformative Stoic practices, reframing failure as feedback. The Stoics believed that failure isn't a mark of inadequacy, it's an opportunity to learn, grow, and refine your approach. Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers, once said, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." What he's telling us is that setbacks aren't obstacles, they're lessons in disguise. They don't define us, they refine us. Take the story of Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic thinker. Throughout his reign, he faced countless challenges, political betrayals, military defeats, and personal losses. But instead of letting these failures crush him, he used them as fuel for growth. In his writings, he often reflected on how adversity taught him patience, resilience, and humility. His failures didn't diminish his worth, they became the foundation of his wisdom. Now, think about this in a modern context. Imagine an entrepreneur who launches a business that doesn't take off. Instead of seeing it as a personal failure, they analyze what went wrong. Maybe the timing wasn't right, or the product didn't meet the market's needs. By treating the failure as feedback, they gather insights, adjust their strategy, and come back stronger. The failure isn't the end, it's a stepping stone to success. So here's a challenge for you. Think about a recent setback in your own life. Maybe it was a project that didn't go as planned, a goal you didn't achieve, or a mistake you made. Instead of dwelling on what went wrong, ask yourself, what can I learn from this? What adjustments can I make moving forward? By shifting your perspective, you transform failure from a source of self-doubt into a powerful tool for growth. This is the Stoic way, to see every stumble not as a reflection of your worth, but as a chance to rise wiser and more resilient than before. When self-doubt creeps in, it's easy to become consumed by what we lack or where we fall short. But what if, instead of dwelling on those insecurities, we shifted our focus to what we already have? This is where gratitude steps in, a powerful Stoic practice that redirects our attention from fear to appreciation. Marcus Aurelius, one of Stoicism's greatest champions, once wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." These words remind us that joy isn't found in some distant future or unattainable ideal, but in the simple, present moments we often overlook. The Stoics believed in the transformative power of gratitude. They saw it as a way to anchor ourselves in reality, to recognize the abundance we already possess, even when life feels uncertain or challenging. One of their core practices was daily gratitude reflection, taking a few moments each day to identify and appreciate what's going well, no matter how small. This habit doesn't just boost mood, it rewires our mindset, helping us see opportunities instead of obstacles. Imagine someone struggling with self-doubt, constantly questioning their abilities. By starting a gratitude practice, they begin to notice the support of a friend, the progress they've made, or even the strength they've shown in tough times. Over time, this shift in focus builds resilience, replacing doubt with confidence and fear with appreciation. So, here's a challenge for you. Take a moment right now to list 3 things you're grateful for today. It could be something as simple as a good cup of coffee, a kind word from a colleague, or the chance to learn something new. When you actively seek out these moments of gratitude, you're not just silencing self-doubt, you're building a foundation of strength and perspective that carries you forward. Gratitude isn't just a feeling, it's a practice, and it's one that can change the way you see yourself and the world around you. One of the most powerful ways to silence self-doubt is to stop letting other people's opinions define your worth. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, once said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Think about that for a moment. How often do we hold ourselves back because we're afraid of what others might think? We hesitate to take risks, share our ideas, or pursue our passions, all because we're terrified of judgment or rejection. But here's the truth, seeking approval from others is a losing game. You can never control how people perceive you, and even if you could, it wouldn't bring you lasting peace. Self-doubt often grows from this fear of external judgment. We worry about whether we're good enough, smart enough, or successful enough in the eyes of others. But the Stoics remind us that true confidence comes from within. It's about aligning your actions with your own values, not the ever-changing standards of the world around you. Take the example of Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher. Despite facing constant criticism and political opposition, he remained steadfast in his principles. He didn't seek validation from his enemies or even his allies. Instead, he focused on doing what he believed was right, guided by his internal sense of virtue. Now, let's bring this closer to home. Think about one area of your life where you might be relying too much on external validation. Is it at work, where you're constantly seeking your boss's approval? Or maybe in your personal life, where you feel the need to meet others' expectations? The first step to breaking free is to recognize where this dependence exists. The next step is to ask yourself, why does their opinion matter more than your own? When you start to detach from external validation, you reclaim your power. You stop giving others the authority to define your worth, and slowly that nagging voice of self-doubt begins to fade. This doesn't mean you ignore all feedback or isolate yourself from others. It's about finding balance, listening to constructive input without letting it dictate your self-worth. The goal is to build an unshakable inner compass, one that guides you not by the applause or criticism of others, but by your own principles and values. When you can stand firm in who you are, even in the face of judgment, that's when you'll truly silence self-doubt. Life has a way of throwing curveballs when we least expect them. But here's the Stoic perspective. Challenges aren't obstacles, they're opportunities. Seneca once said, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." Think about that for a moment. Just as lifting weights builds muscle, facing adversity builds resilience. It's not about avoiding hardship, it's about embracing it as a chance to grow stronger. Take the story of Epictetus, one of Stoicism's most influential figures. Born into slavery, he endured unimaginable hardship. Yet, instead of letting his circumstances define him, he used them as fuel to develop an unshakable sense of inner freedom. His teachings remind us that while we can't always control what happens to us, we can always control how we respond. Adversity didn't break him, it shaped him into a philosopher whose wisdom still resonates today. Now consider a modern example, an athlete recovering from a career-threatening injury. They don't just sit back and hope for the best. They endure grueling physical therapy, setbacks, and self-doubt. But through that process, they don't just heal, they come back stronger, more focused, and more determined than ever. The pain becomes a stepping stone, not a stumbling block. So, what about you? Think back to a time when life knocked you down. Maybe it was a failed project, a personal loss, or a time when nothing seemed to go right. How did you handle it? And more importantly, how did it change you? Chances are you walked away with a deeper understanding of your own strength. That's the Stoic way, seeing every challenge as a teacher, every setback as a setup for a comeback. The next time you face adversity, don't ask, "Why is this happening to me?" Instead, ask, "What can I learn from this? How can I grow?" Because resilience isn't something you're born with, it's something you build, one challenge at a time. One of the most powerful tools Stoicism offers for silencing self-doubt is the practice of living fully in the present moment. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers, once said, "Confine yourself to the present." At first glance, this might sound simple, but its implications are profound. Self-doubt often creeps in when we're trapped in the endless loop of what-if scenarios about the future or replaying past mistakes in our minds. The Stoics understood that dwelling on what's beyond our control only fuels anxiety and uncertainty. Instead, they urged us to anchor ourselves in the here and now, the only moment we truly have any power over. Think about it. When was the last time self-doubt held you back? Chances are it wasn't rooted in the present. Maybe you were worried about an upcoming presentation, replaying a past failure, or imagining worst-case scenarios. But here's the truth, none of those things are happening right now. The present moment is free from those burdens if we allow it to be. For example, imagine someone preparing for a job interview. They might feel overwhelmed by thoughts like, what if I mess up? Or what if they don't like me? But by taking a deep breath and focusing on the immediate task, answering one question at a time, they can ground themselves and quiet those doubts. To put this into practice, let's try a quick mindfulness exercise. Take a moment to notice your surroundings. Feel the ground beneath your feet, the air entering your lungs, the sounds around you. This simple act of grounding can help you reconnect with the present and break free from the spiral of self-doubt. The more you practice this, the easier it becomes to recognize when your mind drifts into unproductive territory and bring it back to what's real and tangible. The Stoics knew that the present moment is where clarity lies and where self-doubt loses its grip. One of the most liberating principles in Stoicism is the idea of focusing only on what we can control and letting go of what we cannot. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic teachers, put it simply, some things are in our control and others are not. This dichotomy of control is a cornerstone of Stoic philosophy, and it's a powerful tool for silencing self-doubt. When we waste energy resisting what's outside our power, we amplify feelings of inadequacy and frustration. But when we learn to accept the inevitable, we free ourselves from that struggle. Think about it this way. Imagine you're caught in a storm. You can't stop the rain or calm the wind, but you can choose how you respond. Do you curse the weather and exhaust yourself fighting it? Or do you accept the storm and focus on what you can do, like finding shelter or staying dry? This shift in mindset is what Stoics call acceptance, and it's not about giving up. It's about recognizing where your power lies and using it wisely. History gives us a striking example of this principle in action. Take Seneca, the Stoic philosopher who faced exile under Emperor Claudius. Instead of raging against his fate or drowning in self-pity, Seneca accepted his situation. He used his time in exile to reflect, write, and grow. By embracing what he couldn't change, he turned a difficult circumstance into an opportunity for inner strength. His acceptance didn't erase the hardship, but it allowed him to move through it with clarity and purpose. Self-doubt often stems from trying to control the uncontrollable. We worry about outcomes we can't dictate, people's opinions we can't sway, or events we can't predict. But when we surrender to what's beyond our control, we take the weight off our shoulders. We stop blaming ourselves for things that were never ours to fix. That's where true peace begins. So here's a question to consider. What's one thing in your life that you've been resisting, something you know you can't change? Maybe it's a past mistake, a difficult relationship, or even a global event that feels overwhelming. Take a moment to reflect on how acceptance might shift your perspective. What would it feel like to stop fighting and instead focus on what you can do within that situation? Sometimes, the simple act of letting go is the first step toward reclaiming your confidence. The Stoics had a powerful belief that confidence isn't something you wait for, it's something you build through action. Seneca once said, "Begin at once to live and count each day as a separate life." What he meant is that confidence grows when you take small, deliberate steps forward, even when self-doubt tries to hold you back. It's not about waiting until you feel ready. It's about starting before you feel ready and letting the act of doing itself strengthen your resolve. Think about someone who struggles with stage fright. They might feel paralyzed by the fear of judgment or failure. But what if they decided to take one small step, like speaking in front of just one person, then gradually increasing to a small group and eventually a larger audience? Each time they perform, they're not just overcoming fear, they're proving to themselves that they're capable of more than they thought. The act of doing builds confidence, not the absence of fear. This is where Stoicism offers a practical solution. Start small, but start now. You don't need to tackle the biggest challenge right away. Maybe it's speaking up in a meeting, trying a new skill, or even just saying no to something that's been weighing on you. The key is to take one action today, no matter how small, that challenges your self-doubt. Because every time you act despite that doubt, you chip away at its power and replace it with a quiet, growing confidence. So, what's one thing you've been hesitating to do? What's one step you can take today to move forward? Remember, action doesn't just follow confidence, it creates it. And the more you act, the more you'll realize that self-doubt doesn't have to be your enemy. It can be the very thing that pushes you to grow. Let's talk about something that quietly eats away at our confidence: comparison. The Stoics, especially Marcus Aurelius, had a clear stance on this. Comparing yourself to others is not just unproductive, it's a direct path to self-doubt. As Marcus once said, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. In other words, life is too short to waste it measuring your worth against someone else's. Why? Because when you're caught up in comparison, you're no longer focused on your own journey, your own growth, or your own peace of mind. Instead, you're stuck in a cycle of envy, competition, and dissatisfaction. Think about it. How often does self-doubt creep in because you're looking at someone else's achievements, their lifestyle, or even their social media feed? It's easy to feel like you're falling behind, but the Stoics would argue that this mindset is entirely self-imposed. You're not in a race with anyone else. Your path is yours alone, and the only person you should be competing with is the version of yourself from yesterday. Take Epictetus, for example. Born into slavery, he could have spent his life comparing himself to those who were free, those who had power or wealth. But instead, he chose to focus on what he could control: his own mind, his own actions, and his own character. By letting go of comparisons, he became one of the most influential Stoic philosophers in history. His story is a reminder that your circumstances don't define you. Your response to them does. So, here's a challenge for you. Think about one area of your life where you find yourself comparing yourself to others. Is it your career, your relationships, your physical appearance? Whatever it is, take a moment to reflect on why that comparison matters. Does it truly serve you, or is it just feeding your self-doubt? The Stoics would tell you to shift your focus inward to your own values, your own progress, and your own sense of purpose. Because when you stop looking sideways and start looking ahead, you'll find the clarity and confidence to move forward on your own terms. Now, let's talk about a practice that might seem counterintuitive at first, but is incredibly powerful for silencing self-doubt: embracing voluntary discomfort. The Stoics believed that by willingly stepping into challenging situations, we build mental resilience and reduce the grip of fear on our lives. As Epictetus once said, what upsets people is not things themselves, but their judgments about these things. In other words, it's not the discomfort itself that holds us back. It's how we perceive it. When we choose to face discomfort head-on, we rewire our minds to see it not as an enemy but as a teacher. So, how does this work in practice? Let's say you're terrified of public speaking. Instead of avoiding it, you might deliberately put yourself in situations where you have to speak in front of others, even if it feels awkward or intimidating at first. Maybe you start small, like volunteering to make a toast at a friend's gathering or joining a local speaking group. Over time, as you expose yourself to these uncomfortable moments, you'll notice something remarkable. The fear begins to lose its power. You start to realize that you can handle the discomfort, and that realization chips away at the self-doubt that whispers, "You're not good enough." This week, challenge yourself to take one small step toward voluntary discomfort. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Maybe it's something as simple as taking a cold shower, waking up an hour earlier than usual, or striking up a conversation with someone new. The key is to do it intentionally, with the mindset that you're building your mental toughness. Each time you willingly face discomfort, you're proving to yourself that you're capable of more than you thought. And with every small victory, self-doubt loses a little more of its hold on you. Now, let's shift our attention to something that lies at the very heart of Stoicism, the idea of focusing on virtue over outcomes. The Stoics believed that true fulfillment doesn't come from external achievements like fame, wealth, or status, but from cultivating a strong moral character. As Seneca once said, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare, it is because we do not dare that they are difficult." In other words, the challenge isn't in the external world, it's in our willingness to act with integrity, courage, and wisdom, regardless of the results. Think about it. How often do we tie our self-worth to the outcomes we achieve? A promotion, a perfect social media post, or even validation from others. But here's the problem. When we focus solely on results, we open the door to self-doubt. What if we fail? What if we don't measure up? The Stoics offer a different path. By prioritizing virtue, doing the right thing, acting with kindness, and staying true to our principles, we free ourselves from the weight of perfectionism. Self-doubt loses its grip because we're no longer chasing external validation. We're building an unshakable sense of inner worth. Take, for example, the Roman statesman Cato the Younger. He was known for his unwavering commitment to integrity, even when it cost him politically. While others sought power and recognition, Cato chose to stand by his principles even in the face of defeat. His life reminds us that true success isn't about winning, it's about living in alignment with what's right. And when we adopt that mindset, self-doubt has no place to thrive. So, how can you apply this in your own life? Start by asking yourself, am I focusing more on who I'm becoming rather than what I'm achieving? Are my actions rooted in virtue, or am I chasing outcomes that don't truly define me? By shifting your focus to the quality of your character, you'll find that self-doubt begins to fade. After all, when you know you're living with integrity, there's nothing to doubt. One of the most powerful tools Stoicism offers is the ability to silence the relentless voice of self-doubt that so many of us carry within. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself," but he also understood the importance of self-compassion. It's easy to forget that being strict with yourself doesn't mean being cruel. Often, the harshest critic we face isn't someone else, it's the voice inside our own heads, constantly questioning our worth, our abilities, and our potential. Think about it. When was the last time you made a mistake and immediately berated yourself? Maybe you told yourself, "I'm not good enough," or "I'll never get this right." That inner critic can feel like a constant companion, but what if you could challenge it? Stoicism teaches us to question those thoughts, to examine whether they're truly serving us or just holding us back. Here's an example. Imagine someone who's about to give a presentation. Their inner critic pipes up saying, "You're going to mess this up. Everyone will think you're incompetent." Instead of accepting that thought as truth, they pause and reframe it. "I've prepared for this, I've succeeded before, and even if I stumble, it doesn't define my worth." By doing this, they've taken a negative thought and turned it into a supportive one, shifting their mindset from fear to confidence. This practice isn't about ignoring your flaws or pretending everything is perfect. It's about recognizing that your thoughts aren't always facts, they're interpretations. And just like any interpretation, they can be questioned, challenged, and reshaped. So, take a moment today to identify one negative thought that's been weighing on you. What would it look like to reframe it into something kinder, something that empowers you instead of holding you back? That small shift can be the first step toward silencing your inner critic and reclaiming your confidence. One of the most profound truths the Stoics taught is that change is not only inevitable but essential to life itself. As Epictetus once said, everything is in a state of flux. The man who says the river is the same river is a man who doesn't understand life. This simple yet powerful idea invites us to see change not as something to fear or resist, but as the very fabric of existence. Think about it: seasons shift, relationships evolve, careers take unexpected turns, and yet, so often, it's our resistance to these natural shifts that fuels self-doubt. We cling to what's familiar, fearing the uncertainty of what lies ahead. But what if, instead of seeing uncertainty as a threat, we saw it as an opportunity to grow? Consider the life of Marcus Aurelius, one of history's most famous Stoic thinkers. As a Roman emperor, he faced constant upheaval, political intrigue, wars, even a devastating plague. Yet he didn't allow fear of the unknown to paralyze him. Instead, he leaned into the Stoic principle of accepting what he couldn't control and focusing on how he could respond with virtue and resilience. His ability to adapt didn't just help him survive, it allowed him to thrive, leaving behind a legacy of wisdom that still inspires us today. So, what's the change in your life that you've been resisting? Maybe it's a new challenge at work, a shift in a relationship, or even a personal goal you've been putting off. Take a moment to reflect. What would happen if, instead of fearing the unknown, you embraced it as a chance to grow stronger, wiser, and more resilient? The Stoics remind us that change isn't the enemy, it's the very thing that shapes us into who we're meant to become. And when we learn to flow with life's currents rather than fighting against them, we silence the voice of self-doubt that whispers, "What if I fail?" And replace it with the confident question, "What if I rise?" Humility is often misunderstood as a sign of weakness, but in Stoic philosophy, it's seen as one of the greatest strengths we can cultivate. Seneca, one of the most influential Stoic thinkers, once said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." This idea of humility isn't about diminishing ourselves, it's about recognizing our limitations and being open to growth. When we practice humility, we stop pretending to have all the answers, and that's where true progress begins. Self-doubt often stems from the fear of not being enough, smart enough, capable enough, or successful enough. But what if, instead of fighting that fear, we embraced it? What if we acknowledged that none of us are perfect, and that's okay? Humility allows us to face our imperfections without shame. It helps us see that mistakes aren't failures, they're opportunities to learn and improve. Think about a leader who admits their errors publicly. Far from losing respect, they often gain admiration for their honesty and willingness to grow. This kind of humility builds trust and shows strength of character, not weakness. So how can you apply this in your own life? Start by choosing one area where you tend to overestimate your abilities or resist admitting fault. Maybe it's at work, where you feel the need to always have the right answer. Or perhaps it's in a relationship where pride gets in the way of saying, "I was wrong." Practice humility by taking a step back, acknowledging what you don't know, and being open to feedback. It's not about self-deprecation, it's about self-awareness. When you stop pretending to be invincible, you create space for real growth and ultimately silence the voice of self-doubt that thrives on perfectionism. Humility isn't just a virtue, it's a tool. It reminds us that we're part of something larger, that we don't have to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders alone. By embracing this mindset, we not only ease our own doubts but also inspire others to do the same. One of the most powerful ways to silence self-doubt is by recognizing that we don't have to face it alone. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "What is not good for the swarm is not good for the bee." This simple yet profound idea reminds us that we are part of something greater, a community. Just as a bee thrives within the hive, we, too, find strength and resilience when we lean on others. Self-doubt often thrives in isolation. When we retreat into our own minds, it's easy to spiral into negative thoughts and lose perspective. But when we open up to trusted friends, family, or mentors, we gain clarity and support. The Stoics believed that relationships were not just a luxury but a necessity for living a virtuous life. They taught that sharing our struggles and seeking advice can help us see challenges in a new light, reducing the weight of our doubts. Take the example of Seneca, one of the great Stoic philosophers. Even as a teacher and advisor to Emperor Nero, he faced immense challenges and moments of self-doubt. Yet he often turned to his community, his friends, students, and even his letters to process his thoughts and find encouragement. His writings reveal how he relied on others to stay grounded and focused on what truly mattered. So think about this: who is one person in your life you can turn to when self-doubt creeps in? It doesn't have to be someone who solves your problems for you. It could be someone who listens, offers a fresh perspective, or simply reminds you of your strength. Building these connections isn't a sign of weakness, it's a testament to your wisdom and courage. The Stoic path isn't about going it alone, it's about understanding that we are stronger together. When we allow ourselves to be supported, we not only quiet our doubts but also deepen our sense of belonging and purpose. One of the most profound lessons Stoicism offers is the power of trusting the process. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by self-doubt when progress seems slow or when the outcome feels uncertain. But as Epictetus once said, no great thing is created suddenly. This simple yet powerful reminder underscores the importance of patience and persistence. Self-doubt often creeps in when we focus too much on the destination and not enough on the journey. We become impatient, questioning whether our efforts will ever pay off. Yet, Stoicism teaches us that growth and success are not about instant results, they're about consistent, deliberate action over time. Consider the story of an artist who spends years honing their craft. At first, their work might go unnoticed and they might even doubt their talent. But instead of giving in to fear or frustration, they keep creating, trusting that their dedication will eventually bear fruit. Over time, their skills improve, their style evolves, and their work begins to resonate with others. This isn't magic, it's the result of trusting the process, even when the path feels uncertain. The artist's success isn't just about talent, it's about the courage to keep going, even when self-doubt whispers that it's not worth it. So, what's one goal you're working toward right now? Maybe it's a personal project, a career milestone, or even a habit you're trying to build. Whatever it is, take a moment to reflect on how far you've already come. Progress might feel slow, but every small step matters. Trust that your efforts are building something meaningful, even if you can't see the results yet. Remember, the journey itself is where growth happens. When self-doubt tries to derail you, remind yourself of Epictetus's wisdom. No great thing is created suddenly. Trust the process and keep moving forward. Let's talk about cultivating inner peace, a cornerstone of Stoic philosophy and a powerful antidote to self-doubt. The Stoics believed that true tranquility doesn't come from controlling the external world, but from mastering our internal response to it. As Seneca once said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." This idea reminds us that peace isn't something we find outside ourselves. It's something we nurture within, no matter the chaos around us. When we cultivate inner peace, self-doubt begins to lose its grip. Why? Because self-doubt thrives in the noise of external pressures, the need for approval, the fear of failure, the constant comparison to others. But when we turn inward and focus on what we can control, our thoughts, our reactions, our values, we create a sanctuary of calm. This calm becomes a shield protecting us from the storms of doubt and insecurity. Take, for example, Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who faced endless challenges, war, political intrigue, personal loss. Yet through it all, he remained a pillar of serenity. His journal, Meditations, reveals how he practiced daily reflection and mindfulness, grounding himself in the present moment and reminding himself of what truly mattered. Even in the midst of chaos, he found peace by focusing on his inner world rather than the external turmoil. So, how can we practice this today? Start with something simple. Take 5 minutes to sit quietly, breathe deeply, and reflect on what's within your control. Let go of the need to react to every external stimulus and instead anchor yourself in the present. This small act of inner focus can be a powerful step toward silencing self-doubt and embracing the tranquility that Stoics like Seneca and Marcus Aurelius championed. One of the most profound practices in Stoicism is the concept of Memento Mori, remembering that death is inevitable. It might sound heavy at first, but this practice isn't about dwelling on fear or gloom. Instead, it's a powerful tool to help us live with purpose and clarity. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." Think about that for a moment. If today were your last day, how would you act? What would you prioritize? Would you waste time doubting yourself, or would you step forward with confidence and intention? This isn't just philosophical musing, it's a practical way to strip away the noise of self-doubt. When you truly internalize the idea that life is finite, the small worries that hold you back start to lose their grip. Let's say you're afraid of public speaking. You might think, what if I mess up? What if people judge me? But when you remember that your time is limited, those fears shrink. Suddenly, the risk of embarrassment feels trivial compared to the regret of never trying at all. It's not about being reckless, it's about recognizing what really matters. This practice has been a source of courage for countless people throughout history. Take, for example, someone facing a life-threatening illness. In the face of such a diagnosis, they might find a newfound boldness to pursue dreams they've always put off, whether it's traveling, reconnecting with loved ones, or starting a passion project. Mortality, in this sense, becomes a reminder to live fully, not timidly. So how can you apply this in your own life? Start by reflecting on your own mortality, not as something to fear, but as a motivator to act. Ask yourself, what would I do today if I knew it was my last chance? What fears would I set aside? What dreams would I chase? By embracing the reality of death, you're not giving in to despair, you're reclaiming your power to live boldly and authentically. Success isn't something you find outside yourself, it's something you build within. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, once said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." In other words, success isn't about meeting someone else's expectations or chasing society's ever-shifting standards. It's about aligning your actions with your own values, your own sense of purpose. When you start living by your definition of success, self-doubt begins to lose its grip. Why? Because you're no longer comparing yourself to others or measuring your worth by external benchmarks. You're free to focus on what truly matters to you. Take Marcus Aurelius, for example. As the Emperor of Rome, he had every opportunity to define success in terms of power, wealth, or prestige. But he didn't. Instead, he chose to live by Stoic principles, valuing wisdom, justice, and self-discipline above all else. He wrote in his personal journals later, published as meditations, about the importance of staying true to oneself, even in the face of immense pressure to conform. Marcus didn't let the expectations of his role or the opinions of others dictate his path. He defined success on his own terms, and in doing so, he found a sense of peace and clarity that many of us still strive for today. So, what does success look like for you? Is it about financial stability, creative fulfillment, or nurturing relationships? Maybe it's simply about living a life of integrity where your actions reflect your deepest values. The beauty of Stoicism is that it doesn't hand you a one-size-fits-all answer. It invites you to reflect, to dig deep, and to decide for yourself. When you stop chasing someone else's version of success and start crafting your own, you'll notice something remarkable. The weight of self-doubt starts to lift. You're no longer trying to fit into a mold that wasn't made for you. Instead, you're stepping into a life that feels authentic, meaningful, and uniquely yours. Let's take a moment to reflect on the journey we've just walked together. These 22 Stoic principles aren't just abstract ideas, they're tools ready to be wielded. Each one, from focusing on what's within your control to embracing discomfort as a teacher, is a step towards silencing the noise of self-doubt. Together, they form a powerful framework for building unshakable confidence and inner peace. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That strength is what these principles are all about. They remind us that self-doubt isn't a life sentence. It's a challenge we can rise above, one thought, one action at a time. Now, here's your challenge. Choose just one of these principles to focus on this week. Maybe it's practicing gratitude for what you already have, or perhaps it's committing to daily reflection to keep your mind clear and focused. Whatever you choose, let it be your anchor. And as you take this step, I'd love to hear how it goes. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What principle resonates most with you right now? Let's build a community of resilience and growth together. If you found this video helpful, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a dose of Stoic wisdom. Until next time, remember, the power to silence self-doubt is already within you. You've got